Welcome to the Shurman Report. Here's Peter Shurman.
It's Monday and a new week. Hope you're feeling good. Doesn't feel much like summer anymore, does it? But it does feel like we and the rest of the world are in a slugfest that we can all hope doesn't simultaneously turn into a round-the-world battle that some are dubbing an incipient World War III, God forbid. We'll try to deal with a little of that today. Our featured guest for the latter half of today's show in that vein will be Dave Gordon, a freelance Toronto writer who penned a piece last week in the Thursday National Post suggesting that a two-state solution is not only an outdated phrase, it's completely off the table. Never gonna happen. Agree with him or not? You'll want to stick around and hear him tell us why. We are also aware that Tulsi Gabbard, former Congresswoman, U.S. Army Reserve officer, one-time Democratic presidential candidate, has recently left the Democrats to join Donald Trump, saying the parties have now done a flip. They're like each other used to be. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. agrees with that and is also now a Trump supporter, as you may know. Hear them talk about why. All of this and more coming up on the Shurman Report.
Now, the Shurman Report continues.
We're looking at an American election on November the 5th, just a tad over 6 weeks away. And a fairly remarkable thing has happened. You may have noticed it, or maybe you didn't. Much like the Liberal Party here in Canada has become somewhat socialist, okay, very socialist, the Democrats in America have moved in the opposite direction. They appear to now be the belligerent party and a party of elites, just what people used to ascribe to the Republicans 10 plus years ago, remember? I have two clips worth looking at, both from the weekend at a discussion in front of an audience. One is from Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is an American politician in her 40s, conservative political commentator, once upon a time the U.S. representative for Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District. She was also once a presidential candidate, and she's very smart. Oh, by the way, also in the Army Reserve, the U.S. Army Reserve. She was a staunch Democrat who has walked across the street, I won't say the floor, they don't have that, walked across the street to support Donald Trump. She was asked why.
You know, pretty simply, we could go into, the story about why I left the Democrat Party, but over 20 years ago when I joined the Democrat Party, it was once that big open tent party that celebrated free speech, that stood up and defended civil liberties and civil rights. It was a party that welcomed people from all different backgrounds and recognized we can have agreements and disagreements on issues, but as we come together around our core principles in the Constitution and fighting for working people across our country, defending free speech, standing up for peace and prosperity for all Americans, those were the core ideals. But you fast forward to where we are today, and the Democrat Party, unfortunately, is completely unrecognizable. And so when we look at, speaking for myself, why I've endorsed President Trump in this election and why I will do everything I can over these next 44 days to encourage others to vote for Donald Trump, because really when we look at what is at stake, it is nothing short of our ability as Americans, regardless of political affiliation, to truly live and thrive in a free, peaceful, and prosperous nation.
So there you go. Another defector is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. His family is considered, you know this, Democratic royalty. Royalty. Why would a Kennedy join Donald Trump's campaign? Listen.
In the Democratic Party that we were raised in, the Democratic Party of John Kennedy or Robert F. Kennedy doesn't exist anymore. The Democratic Party that I grew up in was the party of peace. It was against war. My father died running against the Vietnam War. My uncle spent 1,000 days in office fighting against his military-industrial complex, his intelligence apparatus to keep our country out of war. It was the party of constitutional rights, of civil rights, including, especially, beginning with freedom of speech. It's now the party of censorship, and it's the party of war. And, you know, Kamala Harris said in this extraordinary speech, as she did in front of the Democratic Convention, which was filled with this pugnacious belligerence, this promise to make America the dominating military power in the world. And this is what's gotten us all into all the trouble.
I can't imagine there are too many Americans with us today who are about to cast a ballot. These clips were, however, presented in an effort to help all viewers and listeners understand what's going on stateside right now. In my view, Kamala Harris was a nice enough lady and a fairly benign U.S. vice president who has been co-opted by forces behind her party and behind the U.S. government who are bent on control. And they can't exercise control over Trump. No one can. But it seems those forces feel Kamala Harris is useful to them. Remember these clips. Remember these people. And please remember this segment. We'll be right back in a moment.
You're with the Shurman Report, daily news commentary, live at 5 p.m. Video version live at X, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's Peter Shurman.
Our Prime Minister goes to New York. He's actually in New York today. He seems to know about the problems we face. I'm not at all convinced that he has solutions for them, or that what he has created should be part of what we expect from government. Those are some major issues and places where, if I were debating Trudeau, we would cross swords. Listen to what Justin Trudeau says in his speech earlier today in front of and to the United Nations General Assembly. Not sure anyone in that place bothers to listen to him, but here it is for you.
As we meet here in New York at the UN General Assembly for this Summit of the Future, we're at a global inflection point. Faced with escalating instability undermining the very foundations of the international order, beset by the increasingly dire costs of climate change, contending with rising inequality that is leaving the most vulnerable behind, plagued by the erosion of women's rights, LGBT+ rights, and Indigenous rights, and grappling with dire humanitarian crises perpetuating record levels of displacement, we have a choice. On the one hand, we can bury our heads in the sand, eschewing multilateralism in favor of short-sighted self-interest, or we can recognize that collectively we have a responsibility to set our differences aside, to confront the serious global challenges, and to deliver on a pact for the future that builds a more peaceful world, but also one where everyone, every generation, has a real and fair shot. In Canada, that's what we are squarely focused on. As I travel across my country, Canadians of all walks of life, but particularly young Canadians, tell me that they're worried. They're worried about the state of the world and the future. But most importantly, they're worried about the very promise of Canada. The promise that if you work hard, you can do better than the generations that preceded you. That promise is slipping out of reach. So as a government, we are stepping up.
Trudeau goes on to suggest that Canada has picked the correct avenues by which to support citizens to make the jump he referred to. $10 childcare, school meals, an affordable housing plan, a dental plan, in a growth strategy and climate change policy as well. He says these are testimony to Canada's willingness to invest in its future. He says that hunger and climate are something the world must tackle together. Go try to do that in the United Nations. Anyway, I'm betting that the Russians, the Indians, the Chinese, for example, are not rushing to their embassies to phone home and tell their bosses, hey, get on this right away. Trudeau's for it. Trudeau underscores working on a sustainability agenda through the United Nations. He highlights the feminist agenda and recognizes that rich countries like Canada must take the lead, like a $5 billion commitment to climate change. And these are my words, not his. $5 billion in the face of what India is donating? Nothing. China? Nothing. Russia? Nothing. What's our $5 billion going to do? It's throwing good money after bad, in my view. Trudeau also points out that the UN had a mission when it formed and should continue its good works. I'm thinking that Trudeau has apparently lost his grasp of what the United Nations has become. He hasn't lost his grasp of what it was. He's lost his grasp of what the United Nations has become. I think by far the most important thing he can do in New York is go on to the Stephen Colbert show, which he's doing tonight.
You're with the Shurman Report. Daily news commentary available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, with video posted on YouTube and Facebook. Here's Peter Shurman.
I want to talk a little bit about Toronto seniors particularly, but I don't think this is particular to Toronto. I think it applies to seniors everywhere. And baby boomers, because baby boomers are basically now all into the senior category. They have few, if any, housing options. And this is from the Toronto Star of today. And it's worth listening to. Toronto Star spins a story about a couple. The ages of the two people, male and female, respectively, are 88 and 82. They've had 3 homes in the last 26 years, downsizing from a 3-story house to the main floor of a duplex, and now to a condo, and they claim they can't find an accessible place to live. They spent $18,000 renovating their condo, but it is still not without safety risks. Here are the issues. The shower, which replaced the tub, because the tub presented obstacles for them, still has a 5-inch lip, a tripping hazard. A washer and a dryer in place of their linen closet are the stacked type, because side by side just wouldn't work in the space. Doorways are too narrow to accommodate walkers and canes. And if a wheelchair ever has to be used, it'll never get out the balcony door. These are real issues for older people. It makes me wonder why they picked that condo in the first place, but they did. These two have had some broken bones. They've had joint replacements. They've had other surgeries, like most people in those age categories do, but they're worried about mobility changes in the future. I know a little about this. The two people mentioned are not baby boomers. I am a baby boomer, and so is my wife, and we're a bit more than 10 years younger than these folks. They are long-lived Great Generation members, as it is called. They're right about having nowhere to go. People in the condo development where I live, for example, are younger now. It's turning over. And in many cases, significantly older, the ones who haven't passed on yet. There are a lot of canes, there are a lot of walkers, and this is not an assisted living facility. Many have modified their condos to accommodate, to take stepless showers where the shower floors, you've seen these, are angled inward toward the drain, and you can walk out on the same level as the rest of the bathroom. Most doorways are standard, but have been enlarged where necessary. They do indeed accommodate walkers if they're standard doorways. I see them in the building every day. That said, our country is getting older. It is getting older. And people are living a long time, much longer than our forebears. So I don't disagree that design should be fully accessible or adaptable as required. It's called universal design. See, it actually has a name, and it means what it says. The design can be modified over time fairly easily as ability and age change people's personal capabilities. Examples are lightweight doors, lever handles instead of knobs, wider openings to accommodate wheelchairs, for example, in the kitchen, adjustable height countertops. 40% of seniors report some degree of disability. 27% over age 15, 1-5, actually say they already have an issue. There is legislation in some provinces. Here in Ontario, only 15% of all units in new residential buildings must have some features addressing accessibility. Obviously, we need more. Advocates suggest higher would be better as we age. You visit a friend and you head into the living room, and okay so far. You can sit down, have a cup of tea, still good. Maybe you can use the bathroom. Hey, now we're talking. Now stop. Stop just for a minute. You can't live there. The kitchen is inaccessible. The doorways are not all accessible. There is no wheel-in shower, nor any wheel-out balcony. An example of what happens when you visit friends goes like this. Without ease of access in an ability-challenged adult, there is danger, and silly as it sounds, falls are one of the most terrifying threats to seniors. I don't know this for a fact, but I know that many ultimate deaths of seniors begin with a fall. And I know that as a senior myself, the first thing any doctor I see asks me is, when's the last time you had a fall? Well, I'm lucky. I don't remember the last time I had a fall, but one never knows. Anyway, look, it's worth thinking about because I guarantee you that if you aren't a senior one day, you will be. Seems like it took me 2 weeks after I turned 18, but never mind. In the condo development where I live, we do not cater to the elderly. We have young, we have older, and various nationalities too. Each deals with aging in its own way. However, we work as a team to create activities, card games, pickleball, pools inside and out of doors, and even a very active current events group, Guess Who Moderates It? People quoted in the Star article say that without what we'll call senior acknowledgement and amenities, retirement homes become the option. And I don't ever want to go to one. I don't know about you. Partly for accessibility, partly to create groups who can form friendships and prevent loneliness, which is another big problem of getting older. Having said that, I don't know of one senior who wouldn't prefer their own accessible home. The city of Toronto is currently taking steps with a demographically older country. It makes sense that its biggest city should take the lead. Right back with Dave Gordon, who wrote about the dead two-state solution in the National Post.
You're with the Shurman Report, daily news commentary, live at 5 p.m. Video version live at X, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's Peter Shurman.
The National Post last Thursday featured an outstanding piece on why there is no longer such a thing as a two-state solution for the Middle East. So how does it all end? I mean, many people have said that. How does it all end? And what is the conflict really about? Joining us is Dave Gordon, a Toronto freelance author who has appeared in the Washington Times, the Toronto Sun, the Globe and Mail, the BBC News, the New York Times, among others, and most recently in National Post on this subject. Dave, you know how to get a story. You know how to craft it into something people can grasp and get into. And you say there's no two-state solution. Why don't you explain?
Well, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I have for a very long time been an admirer of your broadcast career, and it's very much an honor. So to answer the question, there are a number of reasons why I wrote that the two-state solution is dead. Reason number one is that a state's been offered 6 times in the past 24 years and consistently rejected. The Palestinian leadership could have had a state, however imperfect, however with whatever missing pieces, but still had a state.
They don't want one.
They rejected it time and time, and in some instances, not even a counteroffer. The second reason is that the way has been tried. And as I mentioned in my editorial, about 30 years ago, after the Oslo agreements, Israel ceded areas A and B of the Palestinian Authority. What a lot of people don't know is that 97% of the Palestinians are governed by the Palestinian leadership, not Israel. They have all control of their municipal affairs. It is pretty much a state-lit type of affair. In 2005, Israel disengaged from Gaza. So that's example number 2.
Yeah, and I might say, because you didn't mention it, when they disengaged, they offered Gaza as a whole entity, including built-in industry, that the Palestinians could have picked up and made money and supported themselves with, and they destroyed it.
That's right. There were scores of greenhouses. Natan Sharansky told me personally that he wanted to set up desalination plants just so that the Gazans would be self-sufficient. They destroyed it and they rejected it. That's twice where Israel gave a considerable amount of land for peace. And what Israel got in return wasn't an easy peace. It was, by all accounts, destruction.
It was war. You could argue it was skirmishes at times. They call it an intifada. But at the end of the day, it's war. Look, two-state solution is a handy-dandy little catchphrase. You pointed out, I pointed out to many. People like Kamala Harris use it these days. Justin Trudeau likes to use it. And that know-nothing Melanie Joly, our foreign affairs minister, likes to use it. But these people are full of shit. They don't understand what it is. And so I got to know, maybe I can tell them, what is the end game?
Well, what is the end game? I will first preface this by saying that anytime somebody of any sort of leadership position decides that they're going to indulge in a two-state solution, I'm going to first ask them, well, do you have, let's say, a master's degree in Middle East relations? Do you have a master's degree in urban warfare or military strategy? Have you been studying this year over year over year? And do you understand the concessions that Israel has been making? Just to be able to hand over a chunk of land isn't the magic fix. It's not like someone's constipated and you just give them X-Lax.
Or you say, I'm going to give you my car, and here's the keys, so you can drive the car away. So I'm going to give you the keys to Gaza, and you're going to make it all work. Didn't happen. Never going to happen.
No. And the entire crux of the problem is not land. As we had mentioned, the entire crux of the problem is that a large swath of the Palestinian citizenry, especially the leadership, are only interested in one thing: destroying Israel and not building a state. And that is no more evident than the tens of billions of dollars that were squandered by Hamas to build terror tunnels, to buy weapons, to do everything in their power to create a war machine where they, in 20 years, with all that money, a lot of it embezzled by its leaders, could have turned Gaza into a little Singapore. It's a beautiful ocean,
beachfront
Mediterranean
alone.
front property with all beachfront alone with all kinds of potential. One would have dreamt that this could have been an alternate tourist destination for anybody coming to Israel. And they decided that they were going to destroy. And this is ideological based. It is based on the notion that they are jihadists. And how do we know that? Because whenever they perpetrate a terror attack, what do they say? Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greatest. They don't say free Palestine. They don't say long.
They never say free Palestine. That's a handy-dandy little phrase that young people, some of them paid, use in downtown Toronto or downtown New York, wherever it happens to be, to agitate for something I don't even think they understand. But look, let's kind of drill down. The bottom line here is you look at our foreign affairs minister, and I've said she's hardly the sharpest knife in the drawer. She keeps screaming about we're working towards the two-state solution. We're not going to give them ammo. We want them to do that. Justin does the same thing. He's in New York today, and I'm sure he'll say it. So does Kamala Harris. How do we educate them? How do these people find out that what the end game I asked you about before, from what you've said and from my own reading and gathering of information, suggests the end game to the Palestinians is we kill all the Jews. At the very least, we evict them and we own Israel. Full stop.
Right. So the catchphrase has to come to an end because the catchphrase is proven to the core faulty. Instead of this two-state solution business, we're going to reverse the equation. It's no longer going to be land for peace, because that way has been tried and it's delusional. Now it's going to be peace for land. The onus is no longer on Israel to make concessions and sacrifices as it has done before. The onus is now on the Palestinians to free themselves of the cradle-to-grave anti-Semitism that is inculcated in what I call the 4 M's, the media, madrasas, mosques, and members of the political class. It is not a two-state solution. It is two free and democratic nations living side by side. And when the Palestinian leadership get their act together and they decide, and they have the agency to decide that they want a free and democratic state, Israel would say, "Hey, look, we're getting good neighbors." As Daniel Pipes once said, you may or may not agree with what he represents or what he says, but I think what the following is quite brilliant. He says, "You don't make peace with your enemies; you make peace with your former enemies."
Well, in your article, you made mention of what happened post-World War II, and you suggested that much like the Nazis were a feature of German society until they paid a price, and Germany really, really, really was denazified.
That's right.
Did things settle down, and today Germany is right up there amongst the nations. Are you expecting the same thing to happen eventually to Palestinians or Palestinians? Because what you're talking about now is taking a new generation, the babies that are born today, and spending 20 years saying the Jews are your neighbors and we must love each other. Because that's not what they say.
No, it's the very opposite. Palestinians are treated to cradle-to-grave hatred that rivals Nazi Germany's vilest anti-Semitism. So the rhetoric has borne violent fruit, and that's for certain. And as you say, post-World War II, Germans had a day of reckoning, a moment of judgment and accountability, and in a very short amount of time, they were denazified. It's probably going to take quite a longer period of time for the Palestinians to de-radicalize, but that will be one of the very many things that they will need to do to show that they want to live side by side in peace. That will be part of the Peace for Land Agreement. That will be part of the free and democratic way of life that we expect as a good neighbor.
Okay, so it seems to me that you and I, we are talking, so let's just have that talk. It seems to me that the current round of hideous interaction beginning with October 7th is really a function of nothing more than the money and the support of Iran. And you, first of all, had Hamas as proxy, not suggesting they're not still, but the Israelis have managed to wipe out a lot of that threat. Now they're busy up in Lebanon, where, quite frankly, on the other side, the Lebanese would just as soon Hezbollah were gone as the Israelis wish Hezbollah were gone. But it's not. So now there's heavy fighting with rockets coming into Israel and doing some real damage compared to what was going on with Hamas. And Israeli forces fighting in Lebanon, whether it be with pagers or walkie-talkies or just going in there with missiles. How do we get that to come to an end? I mean, what you've been postulating in your conversation with me, as well as in your newspaper article, and I'm not calling you down on it because I think you're right, is two sides who really want to do something sitting down and saying, we really want to do this. In order to do that, you have to eliminate Iran and you have to get two sets of willing people. Is it possible?
Right. So you had mentioned the funding from Iran, and that is going to have to be a global problem. Everybody's going to have to sign on to being tougher on Iran, because there's no sense in tackling the small problem next to Israel if we don't also tackle the big problem, which is the largest state funder of terror. And the same goes with Qatar. Billions and billions and billions and billions, and how those billions are being spent. If there was some sort of accountability with the Palestinian leadership, or even new Palestinian leadership, that would refuse to interact with Iran and the crunch was on Iran on the global stage, really that would be a big plus for everybody. And one of the things that I wanted to mention was coincident to my editorial running last Thursday. I don't know if you saw the news item also, is that members of the Liberals, federal Liberals, are now convening a secret meeting. Did you read about this? A secret meeting?
A secret meeting?
Yeah. They're not saying what it's about.
I don't know about this. Why don't you tell us?
They're not saying what it's about, or how it's about. But the only topic is the two-state solution. And the entire time I'm thinking, you fools, how is it that you think that you can walk in a room like you're the smartest person in the room and think that you're going to solve this problem by telling Israel that Israel should just give away land? What, you're going to like move the borders, you're going to move the map, and you're going to present a new solution?
Never going to happen.
I'm willing to bet, Peter, that not the conclusion of this secret meeting, and I can send you the link from the National Post story, that it's not going to mention Iran's funding, it's not going to mention Qatar's funding, it's not going to mention any free or democratic elections in the Palestinian territories, it's not going to mention any of the vitriol or the rhetoric or the hate coming out of there. It's going to simply be we'll draw a map and we'll come up with some sort of so-called two-state solution and think we're all big in that.
Well, you know what? If it's as you describe, and I have no doubt it is, then that meeting is a fool's errand and a waste of people's time. Because I'm going to point out one thing and let you react to it that you put into the article that I couldn't agree more with. You're saying, giving this another go is basically doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result, i.e., it's not really Einstein, but people like to say it's Einstein's definition of insanity. It is. That's Dave Gordon, Toronto writer for the National Post. This time, thank you so much, Dave, and thank you, viewers. And isn't it interesting, while we were doing that interview, my phone flashed and it says, massive Hezbollah attack on northern Israel. IDF strikes 800 sites in Lebanon. Yahya Sinwar killed in Gaza. Boy, if that's true, good thing there. I don't like to say it's good when anybody gets killed, but in that particular case, I'll make an exception. And a possibility Israel may control northern Gaza, imposing military rule. Let's see which one or ones of those happen. Back again at 5 p.m. tomorrow, or view anytime on YouTube, Facebook, X, or LinkedIn. Good night, everybody.
The Shurman Report, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version at YouTube, Facebook, and always at petershurman.com. Thanks for listening to The Shurman Report. If you'd like to connect with Peter directly, just go to petershurman.com.